right, thank you for staying with Daybreak. Continuing with the wall-to-wall coverage of the state funeral for the late President Mwai Kibaki. His body is still lying in state. They're heading to Parliament right now. Earlier on, we had showed you pictures from Valley Road heading into Arambe Avenue. Now they're about to get into Parliament. That's around Parliament Road, where, of course, the public will be allowed to pay their last respects to the former head of state, who has been hailed as a hero and the father of the nation. Many people have different views of who he was, but one thing that is clearly outstanding is that he was a gentleman par excellence. That is how everybody has described him, including the young people who interacted with him and the people who worked with him in cabinet as well. The clergy are saying he never used to do politics in church, because for him it was about religion, and he came in there and just spoke to religious issues and never really took center stage as the head of state. Many people are also saying there that he was not the kind of person who would reprimand you in public, but also condolence books have been sent across the country where many people are signing and paying their last respects to the head of state. One person who worked with him very closely is Dr. Alfred Mutua. Is the former government spokesperson. He's currently the Machakos governor as well. But he describes him as a cool person. But let's continue with that conversation as we keep showing you the pictures of that gun carriage heading into Parliament right now. They're just about to stop. And Governor Mutua, in terms of personality, how would you describe the former head of state?
He was, and let me just start actually by telling people how I was hired. You know, people ask me, oh, how did Kibaki hire you? I never knew Kibaki.
Yeah.
I never knew anybody. And this is a testament of Mwai Kibaki. He looked for talent. He did not look for connections. I was basically what in Kenya today you'd say from nobody's family. I was hired on the basis of my experience. I was headhunted. I was recognized because of the work I was doing. I was told to send my CV. I was interviewed by a cabinet committee. Then my name was forwarded, and without even meeting me, he agreed that I was the best qualified person. So when I met him, he advised me, and his advice was, you're setting up a new office. Choose the right people to work for you. Choose people who will be faithful and people who know how to work. Because that's how he knew. At the end of the day, it's about human resources. It's about the people you have and the plans you have and everything. So that's a Kibaki. That's my interaction with him the very, very first time. The first time I saw him, he was sitting behind his desk. He was in a tie, his jacket. He was in a tie and a shirt. His jacket was on the side, and he looked tired, because it was a time when he was very heavily medicated. He had just taken over, and he had suffered a series of mini strokes as a result of the clotting and everything, and we knew he was not feeling well. But he was still able to lead, and he was working on files. Yeah. He was a very diligent worker, and he read a lot. And but he spoke, and he spoke well, and he was very kind, and I think we liked each other from the word go. It was myself and Ambassador Mudharo who introduced me to him, and then after that I was announced the country. But he was quite formal in the way he did things. Let me give you an example. See, I think it was sometime 14th it was a Sunday of June or something, and Grand Coalition government. The then Prime Minister Raila Odinga decided to fire or to suspend William Ruto and Sam Ongeri as the Prime Minister. So, but it was not the appointing authority. Yeah. It was all about pushing and trying to get more power. So I was called by somebody from the media about it. I think it was a Sunday. I was at my parents' place at Ukuruta Satellite. And I called Ambassador Mudhaura about it and said, Raila has fired somebody. After I established that was true, he had fired Ruto and whatever. And it was totally improper. And immediately, Mudhaura said, I'll call you back. So I think he checked with General Gishangi, who was at that time NSIS, the director of intelligence. And then he called the president. And then he called me back and he said, we've been told, let's meet at State House. We need to get the following people. Waziri John Michuki, Waziri of Justice, the late Mutula Kalonzo. We need to get General Gishangi, myself, yourself, and Amos Wako. We go to State House. It was a Sunday. So mimi I was in jeans and a shirt. Yeah. Tumeambiwa twende State House chap. So we made a few phone calls, and I remember we couldn't raise Amos Wako. He was not at home, we couldn't get him by phone, but eventually I managed to get him. And so until today he always asks me, how did you find me? Yeah. I tell him, serikali inajua kutafuta watu. So we get to State House, and all of us are dressed down. You know, Muthaura drove himself, I drove myself. Muthaura drove himself, he was wearing, I think, a pair of pants and a shirt, and I was in my jeans and a shirt. Mutula Kalonzo, from wherever he was, he came, he was dressed down. I think then General Gishangi was in a broken suit, and we all went in to his office. And Mwai Kibaki was wearing a suit. He was properly dressed up, shiny shoes, and a proper suit. And there we are, all of us in jeans and shirts. I can assure you, from that day henceforth, we carried suits in our cars. We never went against suits. He was formal because it was work.
Yeah.
It was not pleasure. And he took it very seriously, the image that he projected as head of state. People thought he's quite formal, but it is that formality because he believed in systems. Hakuwa anataka these side shows. Everything was done through the systems. There was no these arbitrary firings that we had seen there or arbitrary hiring of these people. I was lucky enough to have been heavily involved in the formation of government with Ambassador Muthaura, and we'd go and brief him and give him CVs of people, for ministers, for permanent secretaries and everything. And he was he looked at everything.
Yeah.
He read the reports from the intelligence. He looked at the person's history. You wanted to know the person's background, the education. Has he written any papers? What does the employer say before he could hire somebody, especially permanent secretaries?
Yeah.
He was very keen about permanent secretaries, not so more about politicians, because politicians are ministers, but he knew ministries are run by public servants, permanent secretaries.
Yeah. Let's go to 2007, 2008, one of the most trying times for the country. How was he taking it? What was his demeanor like? What did he keep asking? What did he want to see achieved?
You see, let me take it back, even before the post-election violence, and this is a period of campaigning. Kibaki called us into his office and he said that he doesn't care whether he wins or loses, but he does not want to have any rigging.
Yeah.
Because there's a lot of push by people saying, Kibaki, you have to continue. We can't let Raila come in. We have to have a second term. And he came to a point, he said he didn't want to hear about any rigging or anything. He wants to win fair and square. And Kibaki campaigned.
Yeah.
He was not a young man, but he campaigned. And I remember my then he is now my just former chief of staff, Anito Mwingi Mutuse, Wakili Mwingi Mutuse, is running for office in Kibwezi West, and he's going to be the next member of parliament there. That time he was working for me as the government spokesperson, and I had seconded him to work at the PNU office, the Kazi and delay. And he came and told me, the way things are looking, we need to get Kibaki to campaign in Ukambani.
Yeah.
So I pushed for Kibaki to campaign in Ukambani because Kalonzo was running by himself. And we knew that this is going to be a very close election. So we brought Kibaki to Ukambani and we campaigned. We took him to places in Kadhiani, small towns. Yeah. He used to speak to a handful of people. And Kibaki got about 250,000 votes from Ukambani. And those are the votes that made him president. So when this whole saga was happening, I remember the last day, and I'll still get to your question.
Yeah.
Something I've always wanted to tell. I can tell it here because it's written in my book. Yeah. When it came to the last days of counting the votes, the whole Tharaka-Nithi things, two things happened. One is that we were a bit confused because our records were showing from our side, Kibaki said that he was winning. But what we were seeing on media was Kibaki was losing. And then we realized that the media houses were not really, telling Kenyans the truth about what was being read. They would read, you get the figures being read at KCC, but the strongholds of Kibaki were not being reflected. And I remember we were very concerned because why is it that it's not being seen? And Waziri Michuki called a meeting at Harambee House, and a Citizen was represented, Nation Media House by Ngedi Mwangi. We went there, all the media houses came, and he was there with General Ali, and we asked that question. It was in the evening. And that is why in the following morning, people said, Haya, Kibaki all of a sudden has gained several million votes. Zimetoka wapi? The votes were already there. But, the system had been worked, the media system, to push down Kibaki's numbers. So there was a lot of ukora that was going on in terms of that. And then when it came now to the day of the election, Kivuitu's office was on the second floor. My office was on the third floor at KICC. And we were quite concerned. So we were in State House, and we knew that we had to stay with the president because government had been dissolved. The only officers who were working legally, employed by the president at that time, was head of public service, myself as the government spokesman, the controller of State House, and Amos Wako. We were the only people.
Yeah.
And our fear was we would get, if the president was declared to win, Raila Odinga would get a judge to issue an injunction stopping the swearing in.
Yeah.
And so we're all locked up in State House. So because if I'm served and Mudhaura is served, then there would be no swearing in and the president. And we had gotten, because Wako told us, Amos Wako, Mheshimiwa told us that how Moi had done it before, we had gotten the Chief Justice to be around, just in case. But the figures were not coming, and then there was chaos at KCC.
Yeah.
And as the chaos were going on, I could see it was well calculated to stop Kivuitu from reading the results. Kabisa, Kivuitu was being stopped from reading the results. Because the previous nights, Martha Karua, Mutula Kalonzo, William, I don't know the route was in that list, but Orengo and others had gone to KCC and to do tallying.
Yeah.
And the tallying numbers had shown that Kibaki was ahead. And our numbers were showing Kibaki was ahead. But they did not want those ones to be read there. And I think William Ruto talks about how they schemed to stop and everything. And they got somebody from Parliament to say that Kibaki had rigged and everything. And so during this period in State House, Kibaki was cool. He was just waiting. And his view was, let Kivuitu announce the results. Let us know what the results were. So when I saw the chaos that was going on at KCC, and Kivuitu was being stopped from reading the results. Yeah. I remember calling Philip Kisia and telling Philip Kisia, we have to cut this transmission, but you can't cut the media from going live because they are channeling a lot of things that are going to tear the country apart. I told him, because I know how cameras work, turn off the lights at KCC. Yeah. But he didn't do it. Because we had to turn off the lights so that there is an interruption to stop all these attacks and things that were going on that were inflaming the country. He didn't. So Kivuitu comes in and tries to read the final results. He stopped. He's pushed kabisa. So I tried to call him. He's not answering. So I call Nimrod Mbai. Then he was inspector. It's Corporal Nimrod Mbai. He was my aide. Now he's the MP for Mutito. He was, my bodyguard. So I called him and told him, I want you to go and get Kivuitu because we have to get these things read. And I called Philip Kisia and I asked him, can I get a room for Kivuitu to be able to read the results? So we agreed on what was called the Vice President's room, which is one of the holding rooms in State House that is used, that he would be taken there. And then when Kivuitu left, he was given the phone by Nimron Mbai. And I told him, just go to that room because you have to read these results. And then I called my friend who was in charge of KBC at the time. He was the editor-in-chief, Wahenya. I told Wahenya, I need a camera person to go into that room. And he'll be escorted. So we connected. So we took him, and he sat there, and Kivuitu read the results. And as he was reading the results, when he was finishing reading the results, the ODM faction and everybody, and they realized, the Pentagon, that the results were being read in that room, and Kivuitu was there. So they came to break up the door. So I told my bodyguard to tell the KBC guy to remove the tape, aeke kwa socks, na aeke ingine hapo a film. So they broke the door, came in, took the camera, but we had the tape of Kivuitu reading. And I called a gentleman called Mwandime. That time he later became the deputy police commissioner. He was head of the GSU. And I told him I need a tape taken to Broadcasting House. Yeah. And he said, okay, we'll go down to the basement. So this KBC reporter was escorted down to the basement by my bodyguard, Nimron Mbai. We got into a GSU vehicle. That tape was escorted to Broadcasting House with about 15 GSU vehicles. Wahenya took it and queued it. So I walked from Comptroller's office to Kibaki's office. And I found Mwai Kibaki sitting at his desk playing with his granddaughter. He loved his grandkids. And he was with his daughter, Judy. And Judy is very formal. proper. When she saw me and knew it's official, so she left.
Yeah.
So I told Kibaki what I had done and everything, and then we went and sat at the corner. There was a TV with a seat, so he sat on a couch and I sat on a seat next to him. He had folded his shirt and wearing a tie, folded his shirt, and we watched. And the chaos was going on, and I called Waihenya. I had that I remember the Nokia E52, small silver whatever. And I called Waihenya, and Waihenya now read the results to me. I put it on speakerphone. But the president said, "Hapana, nataka kuiona." So I'm just the two of us. I want to see the results. Because it says the results have to be broadcast. Very cool.
Yeah.
You know, very cool. He wanted to see the results because to him, it was about getting it officially done.
Yeah.
And so when Waihenya was able to pull the tape and get into Betacam SP and then able to show it, and he was declared president on that seat, on that tape that we had taken there. Kibaki was he stood up and hugged me.
Yeah.
That was the first time he had given me a hug. He gave me a hug later on when I told him I'm leaving to run for governor.
Yeah.
He gave me a very good hug. He was quite happy. That's when I realized, actually, he wanted to be president again.
Yeah.
Yeah, because before it was neither here nor there. It was the will of the people. He hugged me, and then that's when Michuki walked in, and Mudhaura and everybody congratulating him, and then we had the swearing in. And we were also worried about the swearing in because we had looked at, I remember somebody mentioning that it was exactly 5 years to the day that he had been sworn in as Commander-in-Chief. It was expiring at midnight.
Yeah.
So he would lose, and the feeling was legally, he would cease to be Commander-in-Chief of the armed forces. So he couldn't command them. So it would open him as up to a coup.
Yeah.
So we needed to keep the country in place during that time. So that's how the swearing in came about. That's how the announcement came about. And then now the post-election happened.
Explain that a bit more into detail. Why did it have to be done in the evening?
It was done the same day. It was actually at 5 o'clock.
Yeah.
5:30, 6 o'clock. We called the people. It was done that day because we felt that the country needed to be, because of all the chaos and everything, we needed a sense of stability, especially when it came to the armed forces. Because his term as president was expiring more or less at midnight, from the time we had been sworn in as head of chief. And remember, we didn't have a process of handover at that time. There was no process
he was
where,
the incumbent.
he was incumbent when there was no process where he would remain in office until the other president was sworn in or was sworn in. No. It was your sworn in. Moi had actually been sworn in before. It has happened before. You can be sworn in at State House.
Yeah.
And so that's why it was done that time. We felt that it was important to have no vacuum in the country, that he had been declared president and he believed he had won legally, and we believed he had won, and that is what happened.
Yeah.
And that's why he was declared at that time.
So in your view, he won fair and square, in as much
people talk about, the Kriegler report talks about nobody was sure because people were adding numbers in Nyanza, people were adding numbers in Kalenjin land, people were adding landers in Kikuyu land, in Kambaland, to Kalonzo had won some. It was very confused.
Yeah.
But from where I stand myself, and I think some of the people even in the opposition will tell you, yes, it was a very small margin. Could have gone either way.
Yeah.
But from where I am, morally, I felt that he had won.
Okay.
We had campaigned hard and he had won. Whether there was mischief that had done to add numbers on both sides, that's something else. But he had won, and he had been declared president legally, and he won.
But you say he was categorical and said that he doesn't want to hear anything to do with
He was
rigging.
categorical, did not hear about any rigging.
Okay.
There was no talk about rigging. There was no talk about games.
Okay.
You didn't want to talk about games with Kibaki. And that is why Kibaki was very tough during the post-election negotiations, because in his mind, he had won. Okay. He was not going to cede grounds for something that he had.
Okay.
He had won legally, he had campaigned, the other side had lost, according to him. So that is why he was very tough. And let me tell you about the post-election. People talk about Kofi Annan and everything, and they did a good job. And but the person who unlocked and got us into a grand coalition was one Jakaya Kikwete. We were there in all those meetings. When they came to see the president, when the late President Mkapa was there, Madam Michelle was there, Kofi Annan. I sat in those meetings.
Yeah.
We would sit there with Mutula Kalonzo, with our side, and they would come and brief the president with his team about what was happening, and then go back to the meetings and everything. But Kibaki refused.
Yeah.
And I think Mother Karua was very, very tough that time. She was adamant that we shouldn't get into any coalition agreement, and all that time, and she was using law and everything. And Kibaki decided he doesn't want a Turkey. Kibaki had refused kabisa about the Grand Coalition joining at that time. He did not see how you tried to, he saw it as rigging.
Yeah.
But he knew he had to do something. You know, like what Mutua used to say, you have to burst the bubble. Yeah. He knew he had to do something, but he wanted to do something under his own terms.
Yeah.
Not being told it has to be this way. He wanted to be able to sit down. And, he could negotiate with Raila very well. But, when he was surrounded by other people, it ruined it. And I remember one time, and I think this is where Raila started liking me, respecting me, because I was very, very formal.
Yeah.
They would have a meeting, then they would go, and then they would go and write a letter. Isahakia, Dr. Isahakia was his permanent secretary then, was PS his PA, and he would write a long letter to Mudhaura, refusing this. So there's what was going on there, or at Serena, but the main discussions were happening between the President and Raila. And so one time in the morning, they refused to come. They wanted their demands, and they refused to come. And they had written a letter, but they refused to come. So Kibaki came, we sat with him, we ate, we chilled, and then I said, I have a way of getting Raila to come.
Yeah.
So I went down, and the press will always come there. So I had a press conference live, and I said, the President has been here since morning, and he wants peace for this country. He wants to work away with Raila Odinga, but Raila Odinga does not want peace, and he has refused to come. And the President is sitting here on behalf of Kenyans, and he's going to wait, because Raila doesn't want this country to be united. He wants chaos. Within 15 minutes, Raila was there. Very, very quickly. Came and he said, I said, but you came.
Yeah.
And they came and they had that. But they used to meet. And there came to a time when we realized that in those meetings, when we all joined in those meetings, they went nowhere. Because there would be a shouting match.
Yeah.
So we connived this deal with him that would not allow anybody else apart from Raila to come in. And so I was to be the one blocking people, and Mudhaura was the one to take Raila to the President's office.
Yeah.
So we did it that way. So we called Raila. We got people to be in the meeting room, what is called the boardroom, on the second floor. And then we took Raila to the side office, where there's a side office with a connecting door. It was like a lounge connecting door to the President's office in Harambee House.
Yeah.
And so I kept the other team busy as Mudhaura took Raila to
meet
see
the President.
Yeah. And I kept them busy. Akina Nyang'yon there, Akina Orengo, telling them stories, because we knew what was doing it, and we were able to achieve. But despite all that, there was difficulty in really agreeing to the final document. Then come the chairman of the AU at the time, Jakaya Kikwete, His Excellency. And we sat in that room with Jakaya Kikwete, I think, for nearly most of the day, on that, I think, the final day. And Kikwete was able to convince Kibaki and say, the position of Prime Minister, you are still in charge.
Yeah.
You're still the one who is in charge. He, Prime Minister, you will get a person to blame. Sharakuwa Parliament. And he gives an example of how he blamed his own Prime Minister, akifanya kazi huko Tanzania and everything. So he was able to speak, and Kibaki respected colleagues.
Yeah.
And he's the one who actually convinced. It wasn't, I know Kofi Annan did his work, but for me, it was Jakaya Kikwete who spoke the language where I could see Kibaki saying, and actually asking him questions.
Yeah.
So they had this personal conversation between the two of them with us there. And that's when Kibaki said, haya sawa. It was Kikwete who actually basically saved this country and got the agreement that was signed.
Okay.
So the others did kazi ya mkono.
Yeah.
Kikwete came and did the actual work of convincing Kibaki.
During this whole time, there must have been a lot of jitters in government, okay? So what were the people saying? What were the undertones there? What were you hearing from the public service? Were people thinking of revolting? Because the country was up in flames. And what was the most radical proposal you had? Because, in such a situation, everybody gives their views. Let's do this, let's do that. What was the most radical proposal you had?
I think some of the most radical proposals I had them from a gentleman on Raila's side was called, there's a gentleman who some people have described as crazy, called Miguna.
Yeah.
Had some funny I can't even repeat some of them on air.
Yeah.
But, you know, the way Ambassador Mudaura, with the direction of Kibaki, had run the public service was united.
Yeah.
Because we had managed to separate public service from politics.
Yeah.
So public service was not going to go and oppose. It was going to work for the government of the day. We had managed to work on a system where people worked properly. So there wasn't much. The country was aflame, but the government was working.
Yeah.
The military was united. Kenya was not going to have a coup. The police had gotten its act together after the failure of controlling the post-election violence, and the movements were recognized, and we had made corrections, and Ali had made corrections and everything. But Kibaki knew that Raila and himself, they had to join hands. It's a process of how to join hands that were needed to get, you know, to burst the bubble and then the country to be at peace.
Yeah.
But then the work would continue after that, in trying to get the country together. The sad thing, I think what was sad about the post-election violence and the whole period for Mwai Kibaki was that it reversed the economic gains.
Yeah.
We were at about 7.1, 7.2 growth rate at the time. I think we were second to China at the time.
Yeah.
In the whole world. We were flying economically. We're going to be a wealthy country, you know, getting close to South Africa, you know, looking at Europe now. But then after this, we went down to 1.7. You know, we dropped down because our economy was in shambles. It was all about power and acquisition of power. So Kibaki was quite sad, and I don't think he recovered from that loss of the economic trajectory that he had put the country into.
Yeah.
Kibaki did not like debt, and he said that I was in a meeting where he said we have to live within our means.
Yeah.
We have to collect our taxes. And the governor of the CBK at the time, Mulay, was mandated as a central bank to come up with a formula where we can be self-reliant. And Mwiraria was the Minister of Finance, was told we have to finance our own budget, no more external funding.
Yeah.
We had, you know, this is a time when we had, you know, free primary education, massive construction, and I came up with a slogan, because, you know, kulipa ushuru ni kujitegemea, which we started and going around. And now Kibaki would go around talking about paying, wewe lipa ushuru. All these things are about lipa ushuru.
Yeah.
Lipa ushuru. And then now he worked on the credit issues. You see, before, the Kenyan economy was more or less controlled by foreign-based banks. You know, we have the big banks. I don't want to mention them here.
Yeah.
The big banks from Europe. And then our local banks were nowhere. And these big banks had started closing, small towns where hakuna pesa. And then now came other banks, locally owned banks, which now Kibaki was at the front of transforming these cooperative societies into what have now become very major banks today in this country. And these banks started opening Gikomba everywhere, giving loans to people and everything, because he wanted credit to go around. That's how Kenya was, there was money circulating all the time, because he supported local banks.
Yeah.
The other banks had very high interest rates, and he was fighting for interest rates to come down, because they were making more money from Kenya than they were making from the European countries, from the interest rates. Na wananchi alikuwa anaumia. So Kibaki was really concerned about mwananchi and growing the economy. So the economy was at its forefront, and he was very smart about it.
Okay, let's stay with the post-election violence, because that's where the true test of a leader was actually put to test there. You're mentioning the most radical proposals you had. You didn't get into the details, because I also wanted to find out who came up with the idea of this prime minister position, and was that all that was at stake? Because it seems then that it was pacified after positions were handed out. Was it about that, or was it about the legitimacy of the current government, or was it about who gets what? I think
the whole prime minister issue came up during the discussions in Serena about how do you want to share government. Because the whole issue of Serena was forming a government of grand coalition.
Yeah.
So the position was, okay, if Raila is going to join government, we already have Kalonzo Musyoka as the vice president. And that's another story, by the way, how Kalonzo became the vice. You know, people tell stories here, but I was there.
Yeah.
You know what happened, how some people became vice president, everything. It felt, and I think it came from Raila's side, because Raila always wanted to be prime minister. He wanted that prime minister position. That's why he brought up this prime minister questions. He was very enamored by the parliamentary system up to today, the parliamentary system. And even see the BBI wanted to introduce the prime minister position. It came from that side, so that it was felt. But I think the question was, the way they wanted to do was like to have two presidents in the country. So 50-50 power sharing of equal power. And we're saying, no, that is chaos. You can only have one center of power. And then you can have another person share government, but you can only have one person. You can't have two commander-in-chiefs. You can't have somebody say shoot, the other one say don't shoot. Arrest, don't arrest. You can't have two centers of power.
Is that what they're proposing?
The proposal was equal power. Equal power. And we said no. Kibaki said no. I'm in control. I want the government. I'll be the president. I'll share power, but not on an equal basis. So when it comes to sharing, it was sharing power, but he was still the president. He was still the appointing authority. Because the president had to still appoint the prime minister, which meant that he was appointing authority. And because Raila could see, he was getting into government, he was gaining into government, he had no problems with it. Actually, I find that had we left Kibaki and Raila by themselves to handle this thing, we had had the signing long time ago. But see, the others who are all players, it took a bit longer, to work out things. And
these others who were the players, what were they saying? What was their proposal?
No, it was just proposals. It was playing hardball. It was negotiation. People, our side felt like you lost, you want to eat into our cake. Their side said you rigged, we want our cake back. So it was that feeling, and every side, each of the sides believed that they had won and that it was them. But Kibaki just wanted to have peace and stability and for the country to be able to move forward in a good way, in a good direction.
There's a perception of deep state, because you've mentioned earlier on that then there were results that were coming through, but they were not being announced. Who was stifling these results? And because the perception of deep state is that the deep state would work then in favor of the current government. You're saying there was someone who was trying to work against the current government.
It was just, I think Raila's media machinery was very good. And he had been able to, he had neighbored himself to the people who ran the media houses and controlled, and had a good PR team, and they were able to control the narrative. They were controlling the narrative. And everything that was done. I think that is basically what happened. And our side, we had believed, from where my training, for example, as a government spokesman, I always believed in fairness and objectivity, which I do not think was not shown at that particular time. And I can go on record saying I didn't see objectivity from the Kenyan media at that time.
So the tallying was not done right.
Support. The tallying was done, but it was what was being announced on television. There was a lot of bias. A media house that divided. I remember, I remember a very senior editor calling me to insult me. Clearly.
Why?
Insulting me very much. Because I was calling a press conference saying Kibaki had won. And she was very angry with me, called me all sorts of names. And she was the one deciding what's going to go on air. She was deciding on what is whatever. Media editors were calling me and insulting me. They were already on one side. You know what I mean? They were taking a position. They were not neutral at all. I think a few of them were very neutral, like, Akina Mutuma. I remember he was very, very neutral, and a few others, but a majority of the others were very, it has to be Raila's way. Even some of the colleagues you work with here.
So during your tenure, how did Kalonzo become president, vice president?
He became, he never became president. He was just vice president. There were discussions, and we felt. Now, what had happened is that we had, I think her name was Jedediah Frazier, the U.S. Assistant Secretary of State or something, had come in. So we felt that after the swearing in, it was felt, Kibaki felt that he needed a form of government for continuity. And so, but to leave room for negotiations, he only set up half a government. So instead of the total government, he only, before there used to be about 40 ministers, he only had half the government. I can't remember the number. It was, I think, less than 20. And it was in that field we felt that Kalonzo Musyoka, having been third, if he came in and negotiations were done, then he would come in, deputize the president, and now we'd have a majority side on our side versus now the Pentagon side. And that's how Kalonzo came in. Kalonzo was brought in as a way of forming a government. But it was Kibaki's idea, because Kibaki believed in systems, and it worked for him because he was negotiating. As we were negotiating with Raila, the country was moving on. Ministers were going to office, permanent, things were being decided, projects were still, you know what I mean? There was no vacuum. Things were going in. The Americans were very unhappy about it. They were quite unhappy about it, about the whole fiasco and everything. And I got into trouble with a lot of people because of Sami Kibaki, but I also got in trouble with Kofi Annan. Yeah. Got in trouble with Kofi Annan one time because I think after Kofi Annan, the late Kofi Annan, a wonderful gentleman, great man, and he was staying at the Serena, and the president of the State House, and he had been, I think, become enamored by the discussions until in his head, he now believed he was working with two equal partners. So Raila and Kibaki were equal. And so Raila had gone to see him, and so he called, and one of the people called and said that he wants to see Kibaki. Yeah. And so he asked Kibaki to go down to Serena. I'm telling you. Yeah. I called him back. And with no, and maybe I was a bit rude, but I told Kofi Annan he can pack and go. How do you expect the President of the Republic of Kenya to leave State House to come and see you in your room in Serena? And you're in our country. You know? And I remember he was not very happy with me, and eventually he came to State House and he told the President, that young man is very rude. Yeah. Very rude to me, very rude. But we got to State House. Yeah. Because, we had to control the narrative in terms of who was in power. Because you give an inch, they take a mile. And that was the feeling. Yeah. But in all this, Kibaki really wanted to see peace. He was so distraught. I remember he was so distraught about seeing people were dying. Yeah. He was so sad about people dying. Because for him, it was all about life. Because he used to, the only times he used to say, sisi ni washenzi sana, wapumbavu. Yeah. Wapumbavu sana. Munakaa hapa Nairobi, na watu huko wanakufa na njaa. Munakaa hapa Nairobi, na watu huko hawana kazi. Muko hapo, huko hakuna barabara. Tokeni maofisi muende. That's what he told us. Leave your offices. Munabebwa na magari kubwa kubwa. Enda mfanye kazi. Because he wanted us to get down and get the economy going. Yeah. And, he was a good man. Yeah. A good man, yeah.
Let's talk about loyalty during that time and in cabinet also. So what was the setup like? At what point was the meetings being held? Was he ever late for them? And would he come and read the Riots Act, or would he listen to his people first and then give direction? Did he know each and every minister and ministry and what they were dealing with and what was most important at the time? Or was he waiting for updates?
You see, Kibaki had served in government since 1963. He had been a cabinet minister, he had been a vice president. There's nothing he did not know about running government. So he understood every portfolio. He's the one who decided which portfolio goes to who and how it's going to be done. So he understood everything, and he had an idea of where he wanted the country to go. So he came to meetings clear in his head of what he wanted. And so he was not just sitting there and people were guiding him, he was guiding. Yeah. He knew, and he would listen, but he listened to a lot of people. And he gave leeway for people to bring ideas. And but it was done in a very formal manner. When people present cabinet papers, they were presented formally as a written document. Yeah. And then it was discussed formally. He did everything. But he used the office. That's why they called Alfred Mutua the prime minister. He used the system because he understood the system. He used the system to actually get the country moving and all the projects moving. Yeah. And I remember we would meet him. Maybe an example. So we would meet him in the morning and State of the Nation. And maybe there's a problem. Let's take, for example, there's an issue of drugs. Yeah. Or there's a court case. Or there's an issue of corruption affecting a minister. And I would say there's a big problem. It's in headline news. We need to tackle this issue. He says, sour. And then we'd agree with him what would ask the minister. We want clarity. And so it was a good guy, bad guy. Yeah. And so the president never really attacked. He would never ask the minister a tough question. He would never try to embarrass the minister in front of us, putting him on his spot. So it was our job to do it. Yeah. So the president would come in and would ask the minister about this, talk generally maybe about a few things. Then I would say, Your Excellency, with your permission, Waziri, before you leave, I was just seeing in the papers about, then I'll bring up the subject.
Yeah.
Minister anaanza kusweat, sasa Mutua kametoa. But we had discussed it before with Kibaki.
Yeah.
You know, that topic had to come up, you know. Yeah. You know, Mudhaura asking about these things. The president is not asking, but it was the president's plan. But you see, it was easier for us to ask the minister a tough question where you'd be put on the fence. Now he's defending himself. The president say, oh, you know. Yeah. And let me give you an anecdote also about how crafty Kibaki was. And he knew he does hataki kukuganisha. So I was in cabinet office, which is under office of the president. Our permanent secretary was under office of the president. Michuki was a minister, and I was not getting funded from my office at all. There was a problem. They didn't think the office of the government spokesman was that important. So I'm not being funded. So I was always complaining. And the Comptroller of State House, Hislop Ipu, told me, you know, he shida, it's become too much now. You're running your projects, you better tell His Excellency the President. So after one of the meetings, I went and saw His Excellency the President, and I told him my problem. And he said, okay. He understood. Yeah. Because he knew how these games, how you stifle people and how you do it and how these games are played. So he told Islo people, ita Michuki na watu wake wakuje kesho. And then he said, wakuja kesho. So the following day, I go early. I'm there with Ipo in his office. And then Michuki comes, you know. Michuki used to walk like this, you know. And Michuki was my very good friend. And actually, that's a man who is also, you cannot talk about Kibaki's legacy without talking about the role that Michuki played, John Michuki played. And they were family friends, very, very close family friends. And so Michuki came in and said, yes, he always carried a bag. He was also very formal. Yeah. Yes, Ipo, tumetiwa nini? Ipo said, sijui mkubwa atakuona. Yeah. And so, he went to the president's office, came back and said, the president is ready now to see you. And so they went, and then Ipo told me, let's go. So we went. And so the president was seated on his seat over here, and Michuki was seated to his left at State House, and then, no, to his right there, with some of his officers over there. Yeah. And I was seated at the far corner on the other side. And so the president said he wanted to know how the country is going, security. So they did all those things, the formal things, everything. And then the president turns to Michuki and he tells Michuki, sasa wewe, si huyu kijana yuko kwa ofisi yako. Michuki said, yuko ofisi yako hii. Sasa wewe unaniletea watu wajui kazi. Mimi huyu kijana nilimpatia kazi. Nikamwambia afanye hii, hajafanya. Kama hawezi fanya kazi, mbona unamweka kwa ofisi? Michuki yuko give me that bad eye, you know. Michuki akaniuliza, mbona ufanye kazi? Michuki akasema, no president, I'll deal with it immediately. Yeah. Mbona hii fanya kazi inafanya. So nikaanza kujitetea. So I explained to the president what was going on. Your Excellency, no, hii kazi nilifanya, najua uliniambia, lakini unajua, president akasema, hapana, nikipeana kazi inafanywa. So I explained my funding challenges and everything that was happening. So he turned to the Michuki, he said, nini hii nasikia hii? Like he's hearing it for the first time. Yeah. So and then Michuki turns over to his officers. Yeah. What is going on now? Now they're on the spot. Yeah. Then he said, no, tengeneza. Kama afanye, apewe pesa, afanye, akishindwa, tufute ya kazi. Kini tupatie pesa afanye kazi. Meeting ended. Yeah. Walked all the door. Michuki left with his people. Ipo escorted them. The president came. Akanishika mkono akisema, sio tumemaliza. Sawa. I got my money that afternoon.
So it was a plan.
It was a plan. But you see, he did it in a way that hakunigonganisha na watu ati nimewashtaki. Yeah. He was very clever. That was wisdom. Yeah. So I ended up being instilling the good books of Michuki. Yeah. Being good books with these people, because it was not me. I was defending myself. I had been put on the spot. My job was on the line. Yeah. You know, that's how Kibaki did his things. He was a gentleman. Yeah. And he was very wise in the way he did his things.
Did he have any favorites in the cabinet? Is there someone you'd say this one is the blue-eyed boy?
I don't think so. Kibaki just, there are two people he always listened to. He listened to Amos Wako and Mutula Kalonzo. So Mutula Kalonzo would tell him something, we would oppose it, but he would tell us to shut up. Ni mnajua sheria gani? We always felt like if we wanted a position, a legal position, we pulled Mutula Kalonzo aside and talked to him first. Yeah. Before the meeting. That you're aligned. Because we wanted to align him. Yeah. Because whatever Mutula Kalonzo said, whatever Amos Wako said, the president went with it. Because he respected expertise. He respected talent and expertise. Yeah. So, but he liked people who worked hard. And Njenga Karume was his friend. And even in State House, in meetings, one time Njenga Karume tried talking to him in Kikuyu. Hey, Waboi, I think, hey, President went ballistic. Yeah. No Kikuyu here. No mother tongue here. Yeah. Hiyo tunaongea nyumbani, si hapa kwa ofisi ya serikali. No, there was no informality. Yeah. He was very, very formal about that and the fairness about that. Okay. And then, but I know the people was unhappy with. He was unhappy with people who are not working. Yeah. People are complaining all the time. Okay. He was always happy with the people who worked. Okay. But not the people who always complained and never worked. We'll come back to you in and talk about his relationship with the media and also family life as well. You mentioned earlier on that he's really loved his grandchildren. But joining us now is Farah Maalim. Honorable Farah Maalim is a former Deputy Speaker of the National Assembly. Thank you for making time for us. We're talking about the legacy of Mwai Kibaki. How do you remember him?
Very fondly.
Yeah.
Very fondly. I mean, everything that Alfred has said is what everybody who was close to him experienced. Despite his advanced age, sharp, very, very sharp, on top of things. You can be 3 or 4 of you there and you talk sometimes, you don't talk to one another, but you talk at one another. Yeah. He understands exactly where the situation is, asks 1 or 2 questions and instructs immediately. Yeah. And he was, he demystified governance. He made it look like a bit of a fun. You enjoy when you're with him there and the way he tells people what to do and how to do it. And the fact that he also gives you a lot of a leeway and a freedom to run your offices. He was not a micromanager, but you still could not do things wrong and fail to catch his attention one way or the other. Yeah. So and then again, he was down to earth. Down to earth. I mean, you look at Alfred was a spokesman of the government. Yeah. Comparatively, a very small man there. When you look at the other people who were there around him. I was a deputy speaker. When you compare to all the other guys, the brass who were there, they were people who were directly dealing with him. I was in the parliament. Yeah. But he still called me from parliament and sit with me in his office. And first of all, he make you comfortable. Nakachini, pipi mambo kazi. And share some things you wonder why he would share with you. Yeah. For example, when we were going to the east, to China on those sides, he sat with me there, we talked about other things. And he said, we want to borrow from this side, from the Chinese, we want to go to the east. Yeah. And he wanted to pick up my brains on that. We were traditionally Western, we were Commonwealth, we were British. He himself is a British trained. Yeah. But for some reasons, he realized that this was time also to multiply your options. And he said, we want to go in that direction. And I gave him my opinion, my peace of mind on that. Yeah. And he was very happy at the end of the day. Okay. Okay, sawa sawa, sawa sawa. I remember one time when there was a job that was advertised and there was an interview for that job. Yeah. And somebody from my province, those days we were still in provinces, came top. But again, there was a bit of an incident that time in the State House, I think, for whatever reasons. And who went to NYS also one time. What was that called? That man's name?
Who did what?
No, you know. The one who became comptroller for a bit.
Yes, yes.
Yes. We pulled him from Coca-Cola. And he was comptroller, then after that he went to NYS. Gidinji, was it?
Gidinji. No, not Gidinji.
Yeah, my friend, I can't remember his
name. Yeah, I also remember him. He's a very good friend of mine. He's PhD holder, a brilliant young man and accomplished. But of course, you know, State House was a bit of the politics those days that one has to be very careful one.
Yeah.
And they moved him out. I think there was an incident with the First Lady or whatever. So they took him to Kenya Meat Commission there.
Yeah.
Decided we're going to take him there as a managing director, managing commissioner. But the interview that was done was won by somebody from my province, another PhD holder.
Yeah.
So I just talked to Mdaura. I had a session with him there, and he went ballistic. Kwa nini? Apewe kazi yake huyo mtu ambaye amekuwa number one. On the spot, no two ways about it.
Yeah.
The other thing that I remember very well is that he will pick you out from the crowd. And he had a few people. For example, in my case, we were in the 7th Parliament together. I was one of the youngest people. You know, folks were in the 7th Parliament.
Yeah.
And literally loved me like a son, his son, and would sit with me. Yeah, you know, he used to sit in Parliament and drink his tea and coffee and whatever, you know. And even in the evening, late evening, also have his drink there in Parliament. And occasionally go to the Railways Club.
Yeah.
And equally enjoy his bottle there. And I would sit next to him. And we're from two different parties.
Yeah.
He was in DP, I was in Fort Kenya.
Yeah.
And he would sit there. So when he became a president, I was not in that team, the NAC team that time.
Yeah.
And then he came to Garissa, and I happened to be in Garissa that time. So I just came there, and he picked me out from the crowd. Where we, you know, he would now, and walk straight. And I had to walk very fast because, you know, he's an old man. He had a stroke, and one of the hands was not working optimally.
Yeah. And
I went to him, and he greeted me, and then held me with the other hand, and literally refused to let go of my hand.
Yeah.
And walked with me all through those when we were working together. And I said, "Na wewe umepotea wapi?" You know. And
I was there. I remember.
You remember?
I remember.
Yeah. And everybody was shocked. Everybody was there. They couldn't understand this. So the man was. And then when it comes to management of public matters,
yeah,
this country did the biggest strides in economic growth.
Yeah.
Over his period of time, because he broke down all those things. You know, we were kind of in a controlled economy before that, under the late President Mwai.
Yeah. And
just watch. I mean, from a budget. What was the budget when the last budget of Mwai was less than 400 million? Am I right? About 400 million.
Grew from.
And he left when it was over a trillion. Am I right? About a trillion, I think.
All local.
All local. And then
no loans.
Combined domestic borrowing and external borrowing debt we had was $17.5 billion, period.
Yeah.
Today, what is it? It's equivalent to our GDP. It's 100 billion. You know, it's unbelievable the way he ran things.
Yeah.
And then allowed every institution to work independently on its own.
Yeah.
I had an incident, a very, very interesting incident in Parliament. There was an American foundation, the Heritage Foundation, which wanted to carry out a special seminar or workshop, some kind of thing, for Muslim members of Parliament. And at that time, we were at the height of, you know, it was after the Twin Tower, you know, bombings, and terrorism was everywhere. It rained the air everywhere. I didn't understand what exactly was the interest of the American institution to come and say, I'm going to train and have a workshop for the Muslim members of Parliament. I read a bit of a sinister in that, and I wrote a letter to them. And I told them, look, Muslims here come from the diversity of the country.
Yeah.
Some are farmers from Western Kenya, and they belong to all the communities in the country. The 44 communities in the country have all Muslims and have Christians. So what exactly is peculiar to the Muslims that you really would want to isolate and segregate and discriminate against the Christians in there when you're doing this kind of workshop? Yeah. So the next time you're going to have one for Christians, the other time you're going to have one for Anglicans, another time one for Catholics. I said, this is not the Kenya we want.
Yeah.
And I wrote a letter, a very powerful letter. Somehow he got that letter. And the late John Michuki also got it, and they were very happy. They discussed.
Yeah.
And I was called. He said, fanya kazi yako mzuri.
Yeah.
We want one Kenya. We don't want mambo yao wazungu.
Yeah.
Saa ingine huwezi kujua mambo, you know.
All right.
You get my point?
Yeah.
I mean, we will miss him for a very long. Those who work closely with him, not everybody, by the way. Those who work closely with him will really miss his style of management.
Okay. I'll come to you and talk about the relationship with the legislature in just a bit, but for now we have to take a quick break. When you come back, there's still the public viewing of the late President Mwai Kibaki's body happening right now in Parliament as we speak. We'll cross over there and find out what the latest is. Hundreds of thousands of Kenyans are still paying their respect to the third President of the Republic of Kenya. You can still see them. There are quite a number lined up waiting to be allowed to go in. They started, it's almost 8 a.m. right now, and the line is already that full, meaning it started quite early. We'll cross over to Raquel Mugai, who's standing by. That's in the Parliament buildings as the Kenyans pay their tribute to the fallen head of state. We're continuing with the life and times of President Mwai Kibaki here. We'll come back with my guest in studio, Dr. Alfred Mutua. He's the governor for Machakos, but in this capacity is speaking as a former government spokesperson. Also, Farah Maalim is here, former deputy speaker of the National Assembly. We'd like to hear from you as well at Trevor Mbija at Citizen TV Kenya, #Daybreak. I see a lot of questions here directed to Mutua. We'll pose some of them as soon as we come back from this break. All right? See you in a bit.